What's up, FunAhead friends? I hope you're doing exceptionally well, and welcome to the first ever standalone FunAhead TV podcast. Working title, FunAhead and Friends. I've never done a standalone one, and I thought it'd just be kind of fun to try it out. You know, maybe we'll do like 5 or 6 episodes, see how it goes, see what the kind of reception is, see what you guys think of it, and kind of take it from there. But you know, the ones that I had intermixed within episodes, it was called Between Two Porsches. Of course, that is a joke on Zach Galifianakis' podcast or TV show called Between Two Ferns. I called my show Between Two Porsches, but I didn't want to like pigeonhole the podcast towards Porsches only. This is like an automotive, you know, just enthusiast-driven channel. We work on anything from like jet skis to lawnmowers to Land Cruisers to Lincolns to tractors sometimes, snowmobiles, and of course a ton of Porsche content. But I didn't want this podcast to be, you know, just seen as, oh, this is a Porsche podcast and that's that, even though we'll probably, without a doubt, end up talking about Porsches quite a bit. So anyway, welcome. I appreciate you for being here. So depending on whatever time of day it is, grab yourself a nice cup of coffee or maybe make yourself a little cocktail and let's sit down and have a conversation. And that's actually, on that note, exactly what I want this podcast to be like. I want it to be a very interactive one. You know, I'm a big podcast listener, sometimes viewer on YouTube, depending on, you know, what kind of media I feel like digesting. But I feel like it's, they're never interactive, of course. You know, the audience doesn't play a big role. It's just very one-sided. And I want this to be kind of a two-sided conversation. So as we bring up topics, I would love it if you guys just responded, gave your 2 cents about a given thing that we're talking about, and you know, bring up topics. If you feel free to suggest topics, and if it gets enough upvotes in the comments, then we will absolutely have that be a topic in a future FunAhead and Friends episode. But on the note of FunAhead and Friends, that is very much a working title, and if you have any suggestions, again, drop them down in the comments. If it gets enough upvotes and I like it, it might just be the official title of the FunAhead TV podcast. So anyway, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get into this podcast. So again, thank you again for being here. If you stuck around through this intro, then you're already a real one because we've talked about next to nothing and you're still sticking around. So let's see. Yeah, I want it to be interactive. I want to talk to you guys. And on the note of just talking with you guys, I always enjoy just, you know, shooting the shoot in the comments with you, you know, and we always have a good time just chatting about stuff. I appreciate all of my regular commenters so much, and you know, and the ones that just chime in out of nowhere. I always enjoy just having a conversation with you guys. And so I'm hoping that this will kind of bring about more of that. Hopefully there'll be topics that kind of hit home with all of you as well. So given that this is the inaugural FunAhead TV podcast, I just kind of want to start from home base, from the beginning. And on the note of starting from the beginning, this is kind of like of course it's the holidays, we're going into the holidays. It's always like a sentimental time of year. And it's like the one time of year that I actually think back, you know, on the past, for better or for worse, you know. I mean, sometimes I guess thinking about the past is a little strange. Not to get into like deep, we're not going deep, by the way. I'm just saying, you know, it's just one of those things. So I was thinking about that, you know, given this is an automotive channel, we're all here because we like automotive content, or, you know, we're all gearheads to some extent, I would assume. So what is your automotive enthusiast origin story? What got you into cars or motorcycles or snowmobiles or whatever it is that you're into? How old were you, and what were your favorite cars from a young age, and then how did that evolve over the years? For me, it started when I was extremely young. I'm not saying this as like a brag whatsoever. I was just like, when I was a young kid, I was extremely interested in cars. I think mostly just because I was kind of into like mechanical things. So I was infatuated with, you know, just like sitting in my parents' cars and like pushing the knobs and turning, you know, when we were sitting in the garage, I could like play in the driver's seat, turn the steering wheel a little bit, flip the turn signal knob or whatever. That's like, I don't have a memory of that necessarily, but we have like a ton of pictures of me doing that. So clearly I was like interested in it at the time, but I was also super interested in like lawnmowers and like garage doors of all things. But I think just the interest in mechanical things and kind of cars being the epicenter of that kind of grew into me being extremely into cars over the years. And my parents played a huge role in that as far as like being a big car enthusiast. Before, I got into like the nuts and bolts of cars, my parents would quiz me when we were driving around. They'd be like, David, what kind of car is that? And so they like taught me the emblems of cars before I could even read, just by like recognizing the emblems of cars. And like, I remember walking into the grocery store with my parents as we're like walking through the parking lot. My dad would be like, what's that one? What's that one? What's that one? And I could like name them all off. But like my earliest like kind of cars that I remember being into were, I was kind of into like Mustangs, and now they kind of have like their own kind of reputation, running over people, leaving cars and coffee meets and such. But I loved like the Cobras, and they just had such a cool growl to them, and they're powerful cars. And I remember those being some of the first cars that like drew my attention. My dad had a Thunderbird, which I thought was cool. And then he also had like a Ford Taurus, which I thought was really neat. Like, it was just a Ford Taurus, but it was a cool car, very like kind of ahead of its time. And he'd get home from work, and I'd ask him to like pop the hood and like rev the engine. And I don't know, when you're a kid, you just kind of like whatever your parents have, I guess, whatever is like closest to home, and then it kind of grows out from there. I was never, and I guess kind of going past that, I was never super into like JDM stuff. That being said, that was the first kind of car that I ever did an engine out on, or ever like took apart an engine on. Was like a 1992 Honda Civic. It was either a Civic hatch or it was a CRX. I forget which one. I think it was a Civic hatch. But I definitely kind of jumped time there from like very young, when I was into like Mustangs, maybe, to like 16 years old. But in between that, I think like I was just infatuated by like Ferraris and stuff. But what kid isn't, But I always liked Ferraris over Lamborghinis. I think the Ferraris just had more like, so much more finesse to them, and they just drew my attention so much more. I remember the first car that I was actually like deeply, deeply interested in, and mind you, I always had like, my parents got me a subscription to Road and Track when I was pretty young, and so I would always like be like studying every single stats page of all the new cars and stuff. But the Ferrari Enzo was like the first car that I remember just like being so infatuated with. And that was kind of later. I mean, I was showing my age, or lack thereof, I guess, but I was like 10 when the Enzo came out. But I had already been like obsessed with reading all the Road and Track magazines and stuff up until that point. But that was the first car that I remember like really, really, really focusing on. And that was my poster car when I was a kid. I did have a poster of the Ferrari Enzo in my room, and and jumping forward again, but I went to Italy with my wife last year and saw an Enzo in person for the first time, and it was like meeting Brad Pitt. Like, I was so starstruck just seeing this thing. That was the coolest thing, because I'd never seen one in person. Like, that's, you see Ferraris in the wild all the time, but not an Enzo. You don't see Enzos. Those are some you don't see. Anyway, and just the fact that I was so into it when I was a young kid. But I don't know. And then like that, once I kind of started to be a little more engineer minded, I think I went from being into Ferraris a lot into being, clearly ended up being into Porsches, just because I started to think about like the physics behind it all. And this was probably like, I don't know, when I was like in junior high school or something, started to think about just how, and I was always into 911s, to preface that, but I wasn't, like, my obsession with 911 started probably around then, because I was thinking like, ideally you want a 50-50 weight distribution, more or less, to go fast around a track. That does not have anywhere close to a 50-50 weight distribution, yet not only does it drive wonderfully, but it drives really, really well around a track. And it's just such an amazing combination, and it was just like you would never think it. One of the greatest driving cars in history is completely outside of the mold of what you would think, like if you were starting from scratch saying, hey, I want to design a perfect sports car. Well, you certainly wouldn't put the engine behind the rear wheels and have a huge pendulum of a weight back there. But man, for some reason, these just handle so well. And that kind of just drew my attention. I was like, dude, those are so special. And like I remember when I would read Road and Track magazines too, before I got really super into 911s, I'd always be, into the other cars. And if they do like a comparison or whatnot about like, comparing these 5 cars, the 911 was never fastest in a straight line. And of course, when you're a kid, the first thing you pay attention to is 0 to 60 time. And I'm like, well, why are they saying that the 911 just won this comparison? It's not even the fastest. And then I learned, and then I started to realize, okay, it's because when you're behind the freaking wheel of that thing, it's got so much more character and it's just a better all-around car than the other cars in the comparison. So that's why the 911 always placed on top of these comparisons, even though maybe it was like outgunned in terms of horsepower and just raw acceleration times. But that's what you focus on when you're a kid. Anyway, once I got into Porsches, the rest was history. So that's kind of my automotive enthusiast origin story and how I got super into it. But what's yours? I would love to hear, obviously no need to like type a massive book of a comment out, but if you want to, have at it. I would love to just read what your story is. But on that note, what was the very first car you ever drove? When it was your, like, what was your first? Not what you like learned to drive in, because it was probably one, like most people, it's like their parents' car. Well, actually both. Let's do both. What was the car you learned to drive in that was probably your parents' car, and then what was your very first car that was your car? For me, it was primarily a 2001 Lexus ES300. That was my mom's car. Super nice car. Very underrated, by the way. I feel like when you see those, even back in the day when you saw those in the wild, like you didn't realize how nice those were, and then you drove one and you're like, man, for like a Camry-sized sedan, and mind you, Camrys were much, much smaller back then than they are today, it just rode so nicely. But that was like the car I learned to drive in. And then my very first car that was my car was a 1998 5-speed manual Chevy S10 with the 2.2 liter 4-cylinder. And that vehicle was awesome. I miss that truck so much. And it was such an amazing little car to learn to drive in. I've always lived in Ohio, born and raised, and we get snow in the winter. And that vehicle is terrible in the snow, but boy, does it teach you how to be a good driver in the snow. When you've got next to no weight, in your truck bed, and you're driving to school in an inch of snow, and your back end's just scooting all over the place, no traction control, and then, but you figure out how to get there. And I grew up in Cincinnati, which is quite hilly, so you're going up and down hills with next to no traction. Yeah, that was fun. Plus, open parking lots. Dude, donuts for days in that thing. That was when I learned how to like actually hang a car's rear end out, and I learned how to drift when I was like 16 years old. Just, first winter I was driving, I was like driving home from school and like, oh, there's a big parking lot. We should pull in there and do some drifting. What was your first car? What did you learn to drive in? And what was the first car that you had, I guess, that was truly yours? And do you still have it, or do you know where it is? That always blows my mind whenever I talk to someone who's like, oh yeah, I learned how to drive in this car and I've still got it, or I know the guy who owns it. That's cool. Respect. So to tack onto that, do you know where your first car is? I do not. Mine was sold. We traded it in at a dealership or something. I forget what we did. And it is, for all I know, that car is just off the road. It's probably long gone. It was probably in the crusher many years ago, which is unfortunate, but that's the life cycle of your average car. Oh man, I've been talking too much. You guys like coffee? I'm a huge coffee drinker, and I usually drink, I would say, about 2 to 3 of these every day. And I know for some people that's like amateur hour, but it's a decent bit. And I end up drinking coffee from probably 7:30 or 8 in the morning till like just past lunchtime. I think it's delicious. I drink it black. I can't have the sugar in it. If I do, it just makes me crash. Can't have the sugar. Anyway, all right, so moving on to the next topic. So you're all here because obviously you like automotive content on YouTube. Yeah, what else do you guys watch? I'm just kind of curious. And I'm not trying to do that there's no angle here whatsoever. I'm always, I'm just having a conversation. From a YouTuber/YouTube consumer myself, I just want to know what it is that you guys watch. Some of my favorites are, at the moment, at least for like the last year, I think Vice Grip Garage has been my favorite YouTube channel. I love Derek, and the stuff that he does is awesome. And like, obviously his revivals are great, like some of the greatest YouTube content out there, but also just his normal videos where he's working in his shop. I just love watching him work on stuff. He's a funny guy, super knowledgeable guy, and I think he embodies like so much of like the true enthusiast mentality. And super good dude, super entertaining. But man, when I first heard about his channel, I went on a binge of like all of his revivals. Probably within like a month, I watched probably like 80 to 90% of the revivals on his channel, just going way back on his channel. But they're so entertaining, like the idea of getting a car running that's been sitting for like 25 years and driving it like 800 miles home, like that's bold. That is very bold. And I kind of wanted to take off that idea when I went out to Seattle to buy the budget-based model Boxster. But obviously that I'm pointing it to it. It's right here. Obviously that car ran. I knew it ran. It's not like it had been sitting 30 years or anything. So much less risk there, but it had been sitting about 2 years, but they were starting it up regularly as well. So it's not like I was getting it going after sitting for a long time, and that's a whole different league of stuff, but fun to watch. So Vice Grip Garage is definitely one of my favorites. I like Legit Street Cars a lot. They're so good at like filming it and going into like deep detail and like every little nut and bolt, which obviously I don't do so much on my channel. I just find that to be kind of like a little extraneous and unnecessary. But I mean, you guys let me know. Do you guys like to see every single like nut and bolt? I feel like there's not so much value in that, but let me know. Let me know what you guys think. He does it in like a tasteful way, and it's entertaining and not dry. But it's hard to do that, which is why I'm kind of bringing this up. If you're literally going nut and bolt by nut and bolt, then it's like, how do you make that entertaining and keep people watching? So anyway, he's a really fun channel. He works on a lot of cool projects. I go through phases where I watch JR go a lot. He's a fun dude because he just works on anything and everything, from like cars from like the 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way up to like modern cars, to like 90s cars, to like working on his house and doing renovations. And he somehow makes it pretty entertaining. I like him a lot. He's fun. I used to be super into Hoovie's Garage. I think I've gotten a little burnout on him, but I still watch all of his videos. I think he's got a fun channel. Cletus. I'm a huge Cletus McFarland fan. Yeah, let me know what you guys watch. I'm always interested to hear and learn about new channels and just find out what everyone else is watching. More coffee required. Let's see, did I want to include anything else in here? Maybe, I thought it'd probably be good for this first episode. Let's see. Yeah, I've got some Porsche related topics I want to talk about in the next episode. Yeah, we'll kind of, lean into that a little bit more. But for this first one, I didn't really want to. I just wanted to keep it general, just have a car conversation with some fellow car enthusiasts. If you have any topic ideas, please feel free to drop them in the comments below as well. I would love to hear your thoughts, and if you just want to talk about anything, and obviously any of the topics that we discussed that you would want to just like chime in on, do it. I'd love to hear it, and I'll respond, and we'll chit chat about it. I think it's fun talking about like our humble beginnings as car enthusiasts, and like what led us to where we are today, and like what we're into. And obviously, for me, I don't know, it's probably not that interesting to hear like my origin story. I don't know, but like you see what I work on all the time, but you have no context for like why I'm into what I'm into, and or like why I work on stuff, which I didn't get into at all. But as far as like what I'm into, I guess that kind of semi covers it. It scratches the surface. So at least now you guys have some context as to why you always see Porsches around FunAhead TV. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to talk about, just as kind of like a foundational thing, getting the conversation flowing. What cars are in your garage currently? I always like to know what people are driving. And even if you don't have like a fun car, what's your daily driver and why? I love asking enthusiasts that question, because so many of us enthusiasts are like, oh man, like I bought this car for this reason, but also like, man, I love these cars too. We always have like 50 cars that we're thinking about buying at any given time that like could be our daily driver. Like the question, asking any enthusiast like, what's your pie in the sky daily driver? And it's like, you like see their mind just like, like that, a picture of the freaking universe. Like, well, I don't know. It could be, depends on what I want. And it's just fun to like ask that question to an automotive enthusiast. Why did you buy the daily driver that you currently own? Because it's just such a convoluted question. And oftentimes I feel like we've got like 3 vehicles that would be in the running for the daily driver, but then after scouring Auto Trader or like seeing it on Cars and Bids or Bring a Trailer, we're like, oh, okay, well here's one for a decent price or whatever. This one looks like it's in good shape, so that's going to be the car. That's going to be the one I buy. Well, with that, I think we can wrap this up. I think I've talked enough for the first episode. It's kind of weird for me, to be honest. I'm not a big talker. I'm honestly a pretty introverted person at heart. I'm an introverted extrovert, I would say, contrary to the fact that I have a YouTube channel and this tends to be kind of a public thing, I suppose. But yeah, so it's just weird for me to sit here and talk. I think that's another reason why I'm like, I want this to be interactive. I don't want this to be all about me. I want us to talk about something. Plus, I'm genuinely interested in what all of you guys have to say. So with that, please drop all whatever responses to whatever topics you would like down in the comments. I'd love to read them. I'd love to hear what you have to say, and I'll respond. And if you have ideas for future topics for the FunAhead and Friends podcast, please drop those down below as well. The ones that get the most upvotes, we will absolutely include in the next or in a future FunAhead and Friends podcast episode. And FunAhead and Friends, what do you think of it? Is it a good title, or do you have suggestions for one? Yeah, if you think of something, let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. But I kind of like it as a working title in the meantime. I think it kind of embodies what I want it to be, FunAhead TV and Friends, and we're all just sitting here having a conversation. It doesn't include the car aspect as much, so it's kind of like, well, what is that podcast even going to be about primarily? But, we can just talk about anything and everything, I suppose. It doesn't have to be exclusively cars. But anyway, thank you all so much for being here for this inaugural FunAhead and Friends episode. If you made it all the way to the end of this little podcast, dude, major props to you. Thank you so much. You deserve a round of applause. And yeah, I guess I'll see you in the next one. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you for being here. Yes, you. I'm looking right at you. And I'll see you all in the next thing that we do here on FunAhead TV. See ya.